Every choice builds character. On the Virtuosity podcast, we explore how to make every day a rep toward excellence. I'm Corey, your host and co-founder of Virtuosity. My journey into character development began in sport, where I discovered that strengthening my character didn't just improve my performance, it transformed my entire life. Since then, I've been gripped with understanding how we can intentionally build character to fuel both personal and professional success. At Virtuosity, we believe character is like a muscle. It needs consistent training. That's why we've built a research-based system that acts as your character gym, making character development practical, scalable, and accessible, even within the largest organizations. On this podcast, we sit down with participants from our flagship Virtuosity program, where individuals commit to a full year of daily character development powered by Virtuosity. Our guests will share why character matters to them, how they're applying it in their personal and professional lives, and the insights they've gained along the way. We hope these conversations challenge, inspire, and equip you with new ways to integrate character into your own journey. Subscribe to stay up to date with our weekly episodes, and if something resonates, share it with your friends and colleagues. Ready to start your own Virtuosity journey? Download the Virtuosity Character app or visit virtuositycharacter.ca to learn more. Now, let's dive into today's episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 5th episode of the Virtuosity podcast. If you're new, I encourage you to check out our launch episode with Mary Crossan for a powerful introduction to this series. Today, we're thrilled to welcome Lorelei as our guest. Driven by deep curiosity about human behavior, emotions, and connection, Lorelei has built her life and leadership journey around service, compassion, and continuous learning. She spent her early years with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, responding to calls for help from people in all walks of life, an experience that shaped her belief that real leadership starts with heart. In her 29 years with the RCMP, Lorelei has guided teams, mentored leaders, and contributed to national initiatives focused on growth, character, and culture. Whether training women police officers across the globe or advocating for mental health and inclusive workplaces, she operates from a people-first, character-driven approach. As a certified coach and character leadership practitioner, Lorelei is passionate about helping others lead with self-awareness, kindness, and courage. She believes in the power of character to bridge divides, lift others up, and create spaces where people feel valued and supported. At her core, Lorelei believes that leadership isn't about titles. It's about how we show up for ourselves and each other every single day. Lorelei, you've had quite the extensive journey doing many amazing things, and as I read your bio out, what stands out to me so clearly is the heart that seems to guide all of it. It's clear that your work has always been about people. And so it's an honor to have you here to talk about something as personal and powerful as character. So excited to have you with us. Welcome.
Thanks very much, Corey. Yes, I am glad to be here and talk about how character is really helping me in my journey and helping me to be able to deliver on that heart first mindset, while I go about, doing all my tasks and my responsibilities in this busy world.
Oh, so I'm really excited to get into the topics that we are going to get into today. And something that you wanted to talk about was how we can really navigate this divisive world that we're in with character. But before we get into that, I do want to start off with a question that I ask all of our guests, which is, why does character matter to you?
Corey, character matters to me because I think it's the absolute foundation and cornerstone of how we can go about accepting ourselves and checking ourselves, becoming better human beings. And I don't really know that we've attended to this a lot in the last number of years. And for me, I had kind of a serendipitous journey into character because I started taking this year-long life coaching course. And the first half of the course, the first 6 months, was about learning about ourselves and doing a deep dive into who we were and what our triggers were and what our growing edges were and what our core values were. Here I was, a 50-year-old person who hadn't even thought about what are my core values, not my corporation and organization's core values, my own personal core values. And would other people look at me and have a sense that those were my personal core values? Am I living that? And so at the same time that I was taking this course, as part of my mandate at work, I was becoming responsible to figure out how we could implement character leadership in the RCMP. So when I finished that part of the course, character became this really great tool for me to continue as I evolved, as the situations I were in evolved, as I was becoming challenged by what was going on around me, character became this foundation from which I could operate. And, sometimes add some gas and sometimes pump the brakes. And it's kind of like, for me, character is like the guardrails on the road of life, so that as I go careening through life, I can make sure I'm staying in my lanes and I'm not over in the ditch and I'm not over in oncoming traffic. And, it's always helping to shape me. And so if I start to, I think there's a tendency when we're stressed, when we're under pressure, to lean into our strengths. And so character becomes that thing, as I'm having that tendency to lean into my strengths. Say, whoa, 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 what about your humanity? What about your transcendence? Where are you at with your temperance? And so it's just really become important. I find it so easy to sell as this foundational piece for helping to guide us as we go through life, and to make sure that, we don't have to double back and fix the problems that we've inadvertently caused quite so often.
I love that. And especially that last piece too, around where we typically lean into our strengths, but actually, like, I found one of the most powerful pieces with character is how our strengths can operate as those excess vices. Courage becomes recklessness without humility to support it. And that was seeing the full interconnected network of these virtues through the leader character framework is something that absolutely transformed my life, because I started nurturing these neglected areas that then actually supported my strengths better. So that really resonates with me when you say that.
And as you add that, something else that I think that is important to me about character is that it actually speaks to, like, our physiology, our behavior, our affect, our cognition, and looks at us as this whole comprehensive being. And now, since learning that, I am so much more invested in ensuring that my whole person health is optimized, and it's become like a non-negotiable for me. I know that when I'm starting to really feel stressed and harried, and I'm starting to lean too much into those strengths, that probably don't need to up my sleep, or up the time that I spend in fitness or in reflection or in joyful activities. And that's really, a really, really important piece that character brings us as well.
Mhm. Yeah, and these strengths turning into excess vices. I think as we get into the topic that you were really excited to dig into today around a divisive world, I think oftentimes we can see how some of our strengths operating in excess vices can get us into a divisive world where we have incredibly strong principles and values. We would bucket that under that integrity bubble in the leader character framework, but it integrity can become an excess vice. It can become dogmatic and rigid when we don't have these other dimensions like being open-minded and humble to support it. So how have you started to find the what's the role that character can play in your view to help us navigate this divisive world we're finding in ourselves in?
So much of what you said, Corey. So I've been working on open-mindedness. I consider myself to be a fairly open-minded person. Open-mindedness is actually one of my core values. But the more I become invested in something that I see as really, really important to fight for in this divided world, the more I start to lean into the self-righteous, combative, dogmatic, inflexible state, which is exactly the opposite of open-minded. I want other people to be open-minded, but in trying to push that agenda, I myself become less open-minded. And it's kind of how like Nietzsche talked about, don't become a monster while you're fighting monsters. And I'm not saying anyone that I'm debating these things with are monsters, but figuratively speaking, you can picture how, yeah, the more invested and the more you knuckle down about something, the more you want a certain outcome, you can actually become the thing that
Mhm.
that you're trying to go up against. The thing that you're trying to quell is what you grow into. And so, um, like, I really see character as that balancing, tempering influence that helps me, when I get way overweighted on my justice, for instance. Okay, Lorelei, there's multiple sides. There's great complexity. Where are you at with your humanity? And and coming back around. And I feel like, I really want to do well, by the issues that I want to support, but I almost bring this certain immaturity or lack of sophistication to it. So I either run too hard at it or I pump the brakes. Like I'm all over, like I'm kind of vacillating between too much and too little, and it's all staccato. And so character helps me to smooth that all out and to really come at these issues that cause division in a way that does justice to topic and the situation and the people that are involved and the dignity of the people that are involved. And it prevents me from becoming a liability to the very causes that I care about.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so interesting. Like the saying around as you're fighting monsters, don't become a monster yourself. I'd never heard that before, but that's really resonating with me, and I can totally see that happening. When you do think about these challenges that we're in and we're focusing, well, you see the importance of character, as do I, in navigating these divisive challenges. Sometimes some of the critics that I hear about character is that character can be overly individualistic and that it doesn't focus on the systems that we need to kind of fix in the challenges that we're within, or that, context so heavily influences who we are that what kind of agency do we have within that? What kind of role do you see character at the individual level being able to play within these systemic challenges that we're trying to navigate, if you see kind of any relationship at all?
Well, first of all, I think that those criticisms that you speak to are, they're almost fatalistic in their approach. And so I would even say that if I pull out the dimension of transcendence and say, yes, we're only individuals, and yes, we're up against big systems, but if we can start to understand the power of ourselves as individuals acting in good character to actually have an influence on other individuals that are around us, and then eventually onto the systems. And so, I also think about like the political divide that's happening right now. So, we have some people in the world who are, arguably or not, making some bad decisions for the rest of us. But it's not going to be certain individual politicians that win or lose the fight for humanity. It's all of us together at the individual level who are going to help ourselves as a group, as a collective, to get through what's going on in the world right now. It's about our families and our teams and our neighbors and our communities. And so, yeah, systems, like, if we're looking at this as a systems level, it's pretty easy to feel like it's insignificant, but it's absolutely not. To be able to go out into the world and to be an exemplar as a human being that is making mistakes, but is trying the best to lead by character. Like I really do think it inspires other people to do a bit of the same and a bit of the same. And, one ripple turns into another ripple. And before you know it, we've got a wave, right?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I love chatting about this relationship between the individual and the systems that we operate within. And I had one student in one session a few years ago say something just very clearly, that individuals make up these systems. And so if you want to change systems, you have to start by changing the individual. We have to start to be who we want to be in order to imagine the types of systems that we want to change. So I definitely see a really strong kind of recursive relationship between the individual and the system. And so starting with our character it can be so powerful. Second question that I wanted to build off of, from looking at how character can play this really foundational role in this divisive world. What are some of the experiences that you found in being able to really kind of activate your character, strengthen your character to help you navigate the divisive world? You started talking about being open-minded, but are there any other examples you can share?
I think so. Like something that's really big, really poignant, really topical for me that I'm living through right now is I am the mom to a trans person. So a number of years ago, my daughter came out as trans. It was a total shock. There was, no indicators leading up to that. I had always been a 2S LGBTQIA plus ally, but kind of from like the nosebleed seats. And now all of a sudden it was like right in front of me. I was no longer in the nosebleed seats anymore. I was up on the stage. And so of course I was all in with supporting her in that. As I was supporting her in that, I still had to cope with my own feelings and emotions and fears, and like recognize even within myself, like biases and prejudices and stereotypes. And so like it really, really helped me to use all of my character to double down, to do the work inside of me. So then I
Mhm.
could be out in the world helping her to introduce herself, newly introduce herself, and helping her to navigate this world and helping me outside of being her mom, um,
Mhm.
to really be a more active um, ally and advocate, to really be um, living it and advancing
Mhm.
it and helping to progress. I mean, I'm still taking all kinds of cues from the people who are the specialists and the directly impacted, engaged people in those worlds. But um, and so, I had to flex into courage. I had to flex into
Mhm.
justice, but not so much that I ended up over flexing into justice, into my humanity, hugely into transcendence and temperance. Even this isn't so much about a divisive world, but it's about um, my experience, my journey through this. This is my daughter's journey, but I really have to temper myself and half halt, pump the brakes because I need to go at the pace that she wants to go at.
Mhm.
Whereas as I'm educating myself on the situation, I come up with all kinds of ideas. I'm like, did you know this? Have you considered this? There's a specialist that we could connect with that like it's not
Mhm.
for me to set the pace. It's her journey. It's for me to walk alongside her. And my judgment is so much different now. I mean, I've always been a person who is um an ally and an advocate and always looking out for the underdog and always concerned with using my privilege and my platform for good. But my judgment now is so much different in terms of being, well, I suppose, situationally aware, of gender theory
Mhm.
and intersectionality and marginalization and power dynamics and oppression. Um, and so, like, as I go about navigating this divisive world, like, yes, I'm absolutely talking about navigating trans rights and trans issues for sure. But it's expanding into all kinds of other issues for me where I see injustices and I see, certain people, certain issues, certain groups doubling down on what I consider to be unfair, unjust, self-centered. Um, and so using my character to help navigate that. And again, to make sure that I don't become the things that I'm looking to fight against and that
Mhm.
yeah, like yeah, I avoid becoming overly confrontational or morally rigid or inflexible or emotional. Really hard to do my best work in advocating when I'm overly emotional. I can get
Mhm.
arrogant, I can get dismissive, I can get indignant, I can become blind to my own biases. Um, yeah, like love to jump in and do battle against someone who comes up with a bad faith argument, but like none of that's not helpful, and it's not how I want to be a source of light and not a source of heat and
Mhm.
light, like that stately person, um, who helps to advance this with my integrity intact, with my values intact. Um, so open-mindedness, just one of the very and Corey, I got to in the app, I got to level 4 of open-mindedness.
Mm.
And then I had a bit
Nice.
of a setback this weekend. My open-minded behavior was not really all that terrific. And so I feel like I need to go back to level 1 of open-mindedness, like it truly nothing about what we're dealing with in life is
Mhm.
static. It's so very dynamic. And like I love having character like right there, at my elbow, helping me to
Mhm.
navigate through all of these like really like complex, uncertain situations. And I think the character really does help me spend less time overthinking, overanalyzing, regretting, debating,
Mhm.
like all that cognitive noise. It's just less loud and less busy when I'm operating according to character.
Mm. That's a really nice sentiment to be centered around. And it's amazing as you were sharing your story, what I was really hearing is how much your experiences really challenged your character. And in doing so, it sounds like these challenges gave you an opportunity to really strengthen your character. It sounds like you talked about your judgment really looking different and having to use your courage and your humility, your open-mindedness. And it's just a reminder that when we do have these challenges presented in front of us, like such a divisive world that we're in, it is an opportunity to really have a good look at what our character looks like, because we get to see the cracks a lot better. But it is an opportunity that stress tests us, that can launch us into stronger character development. So I think that's that transcendence piece, trying to see what good can come from the challenges that we're presented with. Yeah. Have you noticed your character really change through these challenges?
Yeah. And like, absolutely. Like, for sure, without a doubt. Yeah, my sense of humanity is so much stronger. Like, I do recognize that I live in a position of privilege. Like, I'm
Yeah.
a white cisgender uh, human being with a good job and, financial security. And,
Mhm.
to really sit back and understand that this is a privileged position to be in. I'm incredibly lucky, and not everybody has that, just
Yeah.
by luck, by circumstances. And so my humanity, like the way that this has opened my eyes to what other people are living through, it does not afford me the luxury of being blind to what other people are dealing with
Yeah.
anymore. And so my humanity is just um so much stronger. Yeah, again, my sense of justice. Um I still working on my transcendence and my temperance. It's funny because I think quite often those are the two least popular dimensions of character, and yet I think they're the two most important. And maybe there's an actual link between least popular and most important. My courage is different. I think that we often think about courage being your willingness, your bravery in standing up against something outside of you. But I think that courage is also very much about having the courage and the bravery to look inside ourselves and to look at what we find inside ourselves. And wow, did I ever have um, a really up and down journey, looking at myself and really examining um, what I thought and what I was being blinded by and what I was tripping over and what I had been ignoring. And yeah, like I had to do a real journey inward and
Yeah.
and bravely confront the things I saw in myself that I didn't like and the things about my own behavior and comportment that were troubling to me once I was doing that introspection.
Mhm.
And then, you know, to turn that courage into some accountability and some drive around, okay, so what now? What now? Like, I know this, and what now? How do I go forward? In what areas do I need to educate myself? And what areas do I need to make amends? And what areas do I need to show up differently?
Yeah. Yeah, and to go back to one of your earlier points too, I think it's such an important piece where you talked about how you're in a place of privilege as you're navigating these challenges. And I think it's such an important piece to remember when, again, another one of our brilliant students in one of our sessions posed the question, is character a privilege? To have strong character, is that a privilege? Because you're given the tools, the resources, the role models to be able to help you develop character. And so I think it is a really important piece to remember that perhaps, well, we know that not everyone has those resources and tools. And when we are in those positions of privilege, how can we extend those opportunities to others, which is, obviously something that we're trying to do with Virtuosity to try and really democratize character development. But we have a long way to go, and it's such an important place to keep pushing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So just thinking too about the divisiveness, and you were bringing up earlier about this idea of being open-minded, but not kind of pushing people too far. I think this idea of trying to build bridges is a really challenging area that we're facing right now. Have you been in experiences where you've really tried to build bridges? And is there any kind of character virtues that you feel like have really helped you work on building those bridges?
Yeah, I think, okay, so I've done a really good job of building bridges in some cases, and I've done a really poor job of it in others. And it's always when my character is compromised that I do a very poor job of it. Um, you know, even in discussions about politics with people who think differently than I do, and like some of this is really close to home, right? And you're using character and using collaboration and humanity and humility to really sit back and let people share their experience and their concerns and their fears and their dreams and their hopes, and not be waiting to use it as an opportunity to school them in my way of thinking, but to truly sit back and receive the information and what they're sharing, and using it to understand where they're coming from. And also, granting people the autonomy of opinion and the agency to have their own opinions, even if they're different than mine. Like, I have to exercise so much temperance around that, because I'm so eager to push them to a place that's more aligned with what I think. And like, it's not fair. That's not just, that's not equitable. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I really think, if we accept, or if we entertain the idea that we are currently living in a time that um, consists of, a crisis of belonging and a crisis of connection, what we really, really need to do is to connect and to build bridges and to extend a hand. And that can't be ego driven. It can't be um, built on self interest. Like, it really has to be about like creating trust and creating psychological safety, and really recognizing the dignity of other people, and really disciplining ourselves to accept and understand and appreciate that other people, there's value in what they say and there's value in what they share, even when it's different from what we value. And I think that, in social media platforms across the world, people that are in high profile positions, we're not necessarily getting the best examples or models of how to do that. We're getting a lot of combativeness, divisiveness being modeled by those people, my way or the highway, and self-righteousness and arrogance, and, well, I mean, even name calling and finger pointing, and things that really aren't uh, there's words that I want to use here, and I'm trying to choose a proper word, but really don't do honor to the positions that they're in and the power that they've been provided with, in particular in a democracy where they've been voted in. And so it's for all the rest of us to really do the hard work of getting ourselves to a place where we appreciate other people who are different than us, and understand that that doesn't make them lesser, doesn't make us
Mm-hmm.
better. But when we really, really care about these issues, it's so hard to put aside the emotion and to think, in a way that is character led. That's why it's wonderful that we have character to guide us in doing it.
Yeah, that temperance space when you talk about being able to regulate our emotions, I really see that being heavily anchored in temperance, but of course, perhaps being helped by other areas. Like if you have, compassion and empathy for someone else, it could regulate your own emotions. But temperance, that's the dimension in our research that comes out consistently the lowest, no matter who the group is, where the group is, it's consistently the lowest. And so it's no surprise that so many of us do have really big challenges regulating our emotions in these really charged situations. And I think when we talk about building bridges, it's funny, I've really been reflecting on this area a lot more recently. And I've started to notice that I think when a lot of people try and build bridges, they try and build a bridge by getting other people to understand them, right? Like you're trying to push your idea onto someone else so that they understand you, but rarely are we just trying to understand somebody else. And it's and then a bit of a related note. I was listening to some interesting research on politics, kind of party approaches in terms of like how do you get voters out and who do they vote for. And I learned that one of the kind of prominent strategies for political parties is not to be changing people's minds, not to be changing voters' minds, but actually just getting the people out that were going to vote for your party. And what that says to me is that it is really hard to change people's minds about deep values, deep principles. So when we are trying to build bridges, really trying to come from a place of understanding, listening, as you're saying, caring, and not trying to project our own views onto others, because it's more and more and more, I'm starting to see how that's absolute setting ourselves up for failure.
Yeah, I had a really good deep dive into how to listen actively when I did that life
Mm.
coaching course, because life
Oh,
coaching is not
nice.
actually about giving other people answers. It's about
Yeah.
just giving them space to explore what they're going through and to find the answers within themselves. So it is a lot of just sitting and listening, and so often biting your tongue because you just want to jump in with a solution. It's so obvious, it's right in front of you, and they're having trouble coming around to it. And you just continue to sit and listen and ask open-ended questions. And so that, that was a very good uh, education for me, but also this idea of perspective getting and, really asking and listening and learning from another person what it is like to be them. And then not jumping in and saying, okay, my turn. I'm going to tell you what it's like to be me. But like just having so much temperance and patience around, yeah, that active seeking to understand another person's thoughts. And then that helps to build trust and empathy and,
Mhm.
helps us to eliminate biases or stereotypes that we've been operating from. And yeah, it bridges that divide between like whether it's race, religion, politics, gender, social class. Um, questions of like, you know, asking, help me to understand rather than saying, well, here's what I think. Or what is this like for you? And what do you hope that other people understand? Um, yeah, and just, really giving other people a platform. But it's difficult. It's not what, so many of us in particular in leadership positions, like we think we need to have to, like we need to take up the most space, the most time. Um, we need to give answers. We need to insert ourselves. We need to come in with the solutions. And that really is not very often helpful. And in particular, when we're
Yeah.
talking about people being divided and people being on opposite sides of an issue, best thing we can possibly bring forward is that really, really thoughtful, um, giving space and time for another person to say who they are and what's important to them and how they're experiencing a situation.
Yeah. I think I really struggled with that one for a while, actually. And I think sometimes like different things can click for people, but for me it was knowing that like most people's beliefs and values don't change, and that it's not a big surprise, but just seeing that in the research and knowing that it's almost like there's no point to be trying to push your perspective or your view. Like it's your accountability to perhaps share your stance on certain things, but not in a way to change someone's mind. And that's really helped me kind of like release kind of the tight grip or control on trying to control an outcome, whereas it is just more listening. And it's funny that you talk about the coaching piece because I haven't done a lot of coaching training. I just got the opportunity to do a full day module. And it was this whole, we got to practice in breakout groups. And it was this idea of asking more questions, creating space. And it's so funny because I realized that even though I've been an athletic coaches more take this kind of like competency consulting approach, I would say, and then also being an academic and playing consultant roles. I've realized that I've always played that this is what I know type of approach. And so doing the coaching training was so eye-opening for me in terms of how I can be more open-minded, active listening. And it was like one of these tools, like, we just did the improv yesterday to develop collaboration. It's like actually like the skill of coaching is almost this really fantastic tool to be able to get us to develop these things like empathy, compassion, open-mindedness, because you really are forced to ask the questions, listen, not tell people what to do.
Yeah, we often think that the most special 3 words you could say to someone would be, "I love you," but I think instead, the most special 3 words you can say to someone are, "Tell me more." So
Yeah.
often no one ever asks us, like, about our thoughts. Like, everyone's just posturing to insert their own opinion into a conversation, and to actually have conversations with people where you just say, "Tell me more.
Yeah.
Tell me more. Tell me more," and then just soak it all up like a sponge and to come away changed or different by what you heard another person say. And like, I'm not talking about going into these conversations either prepared to change your own values. I'm not wanting or needing to change my own values or positions on things,
Mhm.
but you can still build a bridge by with people by saying, like, well, what is your experience of this like? What are your concerns around this? How would it be different for you if this went ahead or didn't go ahead? And tell me more. Tell me more. And sometimes that's a great, like, yes, and
Yeah.
that's a great thing to say when you're stuck and you're thinking, I can't think of an open-ended question right now and I want to keep listening,
Mhm.
but I'm kind of a little stuck. Like, just say, tell me more. Like, toss the
Mhm.
ball back to them, give them another opening.
I love that. I'm gonna keep those words in my back pocket next time. I like that a lot. So, in terms of like tools and development practices, you've been using Virtuosity for the past few months now. How have you noticed, or what have been some of the experiences that you've noticed in terms of strengthening your character? You've been on Open Minded for the past 4 weeks, I think you said. Yeah, what are
Going
some
back to the
experiences you could
beginning.
share? Yeah, yeah, and yeah, tell us some examples about what you've been noticing, and even how you think it can help in this divisive world topic that we're getting into.
I think that one thing that the app really helps with is, like, being there I'll say in front of me all the time so that it's always remaining in my mind. It's that reminder all the time, so that when, like, we get so distracted, we get so busy, you start your day and you've got 3 things on your to-do list, and by noon you've got 15 things on your to-do list, but you haven't done the first 3, and it's so easy to be pulled away from what it was that we were intending to accomplish. And so the app, like, keeps it, like, right in front of me. And so you open your day with the app and you close your day with the app. Or, some of my colleagues, you do a noon hour check-in to
Mhm.
just keep, reminding ourselves of where we're at. And um I really think that the app is, like, it's helping me to elevate myself and my own behavior, rather than escalate things. It's helping me to respond rather than to react. Um, it's helping me to know when I need to make amends and go back, like, where I haven't been open-minded. And so sometimes making amends is like, "I'm sorry," but sometimes it's just going back to a previous conversation, like, and realizing, "You know what? I probably wasn't truly open-minded. I was listening through my own lens." And so if I, really want to be developing my open-mindedness, I need to go back and reopen that conversation and give that person another opportunity to share what they were thinking or what their ideas were. Sometimes it's about going and doing um, different research. If I'm on social media and I'm continuing to be in that echo chamber of the same messages and the same positions, and they're getting increasingly dogmatic or entrenched. Okay, well, you know what? I need to go listen to somebody else. Like, I need to pick somebody who's on the opposite side of this issue and go listen to what they have to say about it. And that's a really nice way to um, I don't know, to kind of engage without really investing. It's
Mhm.
light touch. Like, okay, I just spent half an hour listening to this YouTuber. I'm gonna go listen to some other YouTuber. Um, is that answering your question, Corey?
Yeah, definitely. And I I thought it was interesting when you talked about getting into the stage 4, level 4 this week with being open-minded, which is for the listeners, if they're not sure what stage 4 is, it's this idea that after we've learned how to discover what our character looks like, activate it, strengthen it, now we're noticing the connection. So you're focusing on being open-minded, but how is your open-mindedness connected to these other dimensions? Have you noticed any particular dimensions playing a really important role in helping you to be open-minded?
Absolutely. Absolutely, temperance and transcendence. Like, again, back to those two,
Yeah.
the kind of like the dark horses of character, I think, if I may. Um, yeah, like absolutely have to slow down and pump the brakes if I'm going to be open-minded. And so there's where I have to start flexing my temperance and just like stop and take a breath. You know what? I've done a bit of habit stacking. I'm not sure if this is how habit stacking is meant to go, but I have one of my dogs is a big sigher. She's a happy little dog, but she sighs all the time. Like every time she lays down, gets up, settles into the couch, settles into my lap, she sighs. And every time she sighs, I do a big breath. And so I've kind of habit stacked my deep breathing.
That is a habit stack. Yeah.
Yes.
That's so
Yes.
good.
Um, and then also my transcendence, like that whole idea around like I can afford to be open-minded because I don't have to win every battle. You can lose a battle and you can still win the war. And eventually, like things are going to change and things are going to progress. And I can't see it right in front of me right now because it's up and around a corner. Or it's not. But I trust goodness will prevail, and so I can afford to be open-minded here and not force my opinions or not use this as an counter to debate across, ideologies or political positions or something. Lorelei, like we've got runway here. Like settle down,
Yeah.
have hope, have faith. And so yeah, I the temperance, the transcendence, the collaboration too, working the idea of working with people and building those two-way connections with people also helps with open-mindedness, clearly as well. Having conversations, the root of the word conversation means to turn over together. So it's really about two-way dialogue, not just engaging in a conversation so that you have an opportunity to say what you think is right.
That's really cool. And the transcendence piece has been something that really helped me. I've been also focusing on being open-minded for the last 4 weeks. And it always surprises me how powerful transcendence is. And for me, it's thinking about how two things can exist at the same time. So my idea and somebody else's idea, while they could seem opposing at first because somebody else's idea might threaten my own, using that transcendence to imagine an and possibility where both exist has really helped me. And so, yeah, I like you calling them the dark horse, the secret dimensions that we don't focus on as much.
Yeah.
Transcendence has been such like a North Star for me in navigating like really challenging conversations.
Yeah. I think and I love that it's like at the top of the model. So
Yeah.
hopefully the more we look at the model, the more we start there. Like it literally is the North Star within the model. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so as we are winding down our time here, the question that I always end asking our guests is around the character quotient. So, for the listeners that may not know what the character quotient is, it's a set of questions that Mary and I put together that help people essentially identify how effective they are essentially kind of bringing character into different areas of their life. So it's different than examining the strength of your character, but how you're bringing character into the world, so to speak. And so we have 10 questions. There's 4 questions around your awareness of character, 4 questions around the development of your character, and 2 questions around your application of character in organizations. So would you be willing to tell us a little bit about how that assessment went for you, which areas you feel really proud of, perhaps why, and maybe some of the challenge areas that you had?
Yeah. Okay. So I found myself flunking on open-mindedness this weekend. Like things just got too much. There was too much going on. It was what, I don't know, getting to be 5 days until the Canadian election. Things are still going on in the US. There's been a recent ruling in the UK that is, really problematic for me. That happened last week. So like I was really like on both knees, not doing well on the weekend. And, I fully recognize that. I did the character quotient at that point. I got 74%. Things that came up just fine, with the elements about character and organizations. Yeah, absolutely. Scoring high over there. I get that. it's like the character within myself part that was problematic. And I knew it. I knew it. Like it was, I botched a situation, a conversation. I got too emotional. I got too entrenched. I got too self-righteous. I was, overweighting on justice and drive. And so I gave myself low scores on I championed character at every opportunity because I would say I had not. There had been opportunities and I simply did not earn top marks. And then also my character is not conditional on my context. I gave myself
That's
low
a
marks
tough one.
there because, yeah, I fully recognize that in that particular situation, I was spread too thin. I was tired. I was irritable. I had not invested enough time in activities that are, restorative and bring me joy and bring me balance and center me again. And I reacted rather than responding. I escalated rather than elevate. And yeah, so I had to eat, a really healthy dose of humble pie and say, like, okay, like, now what? Like, what are my next best steps given that I hit a guardrail on that, if character is the guardrails keeping me, driving forward in the right lanes of life, well, I just bounced off a guardrail. And so, what do I do now and how do I go back
Yeah.
and make amends and how do I get back on my feet and carry forward in the right direction?
Yeah. Well, and even the fact that you're thinking about all of these things and you're aware of them, like it shows such the strength of character and focus that you've made it to be in your life. But that one question, how your character is not dependent on context, I totally resonate with that one being a challenge. Like I think I've scored that one clearly as my lowest. And I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with because for your character to not be heavily influenced by context, your character has to be so strong, almost perfect in a sense. Doesn't mean that we don't try to aspire to that, but it's such a challenging one.
It really is. Yeah. And I am but a mere mortal. And yeah, it's difficult. And when we're not at optimal health or when we don't have all our spoons, that's an analogy some people use. eh, it is just really hard to bring our best selves, our best character forward when we're like at the bottom of the dog pile of life, and yet that's when it's most important to do it. And so, I really appreciate all of the exposure, like back to that idea of character that's connection with privilege, like all the exposure that I've had to character. Um, yeah, and the fact that, every time somebody writes a new book about character or something, I go, can go order it on Amazon and have the time to sink into it because I don't have to work 3 jobs and such. Um, but it's the thing that is continuing to help me dig myself out from the trouble that I get my own self into and
Mm.
become a better version of me.
Yeah, it's funny, the more and more you focus on character, it almost reveals all of the opportunities that we have to strengthen our character even more. And it's funny because when we look at scaling ourselves or assessing ourselves on strength of character, we typically use a scale. In Virtuosity, we use a 0 to 10 scale. But actually, I feel like that 10 is just a moving goalpost. Like every single time you strengthen your character, as you think you get closer, it then gets further away. And I think that's the blessing and the curse of character, that it's never going to be perfect, but it's actually a blessing to know that we can always be better. And so sometimes when we're frustrated with our character, just remembering that at least, we see opportunity for growth and we have the tools, we can work on strengthening our character.
Absolutely, absolutely. We are so much better off, even if the goalpost continues to change, the more aware we get. It's like it was Maya Angelou that said, we do best we can at the time, and when we know better, we do better. So even though that goalpost is always changing, if we look at where we came from and where we would be if we didn't have character be influencing and guiding our actions, our thoughts, our engagements, wow, I don't even want to think about the dumpster fire I might might be I might be in. Might be in. So, um, yeah, I
Yeah.
fully appreciate that this is a lifelong journey, and there is no finish line, and yet it is so worth running that race, so to speak. It's not a race. It's so worth taking the journey, even though there's no
Mhm.
finish line, because
Yeah.
it is just, yeah, it is just bringing so much more health and quality to everything that
Mhm.
I do and to all my relationships, including very much my relationship with myself.
Yeah. Oh, that's such an important point. You know, focusing on the process, not always the outcome. And of course, focusing on the process will help us in the outcomes. It's not that we don't care about that. So, okay, that was the last question, but I want to just turn it back to you. Make sure that we've covered everything that you wanted to cover around character. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you'd like to share before we do close up our time together?
Mm. I don't think so. I just, want to encourage everyone that's, doing this work of building character and encourage all of us to, to keep doing it. It's so worthwhile. And we are all contributing to making the world a better place. And yeah, we are each that ripple in the ocean that eventually will create a wave. And so, yeah, I really appreciate the effort that everyone else goes to as well, because I'm a beneficiary of the effort that they put into their own character. So,
Oh, I love that. I definitely think that we are creating waves and they're getting bigger and bigger. Well, thanks so much, Lorelei, for sharing some of your experiences. And I think you've given myself and a lot of the listeners some really practical examples of how we can exercise our character in terms of being open-minded while having our values at the same time, activating on our temperance, also thinking about transcendence in these really challenging conversations, the divisive world we're in. So I'm really excited for the listeners to get to dig in and hopefully be able to use some of these really specific examples in their own lives. So thank you so much for joining us.
thank you, Corey.
You have just finished another episode from the Virtuosity podcast. If you have any questions and want to connect, please reach out to me at Corey@virtuositycharacter.ca. I'm also on LinkedIn, so let's connect. As always, thank you so much for listening. Bye for now.